This video is brought to you by Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Dan and use code Dan for a special offer, and stay tuned after the video for more info. Hello everybody, and welcome to another edition in a video series that I call If I Ran. Basically, I pretend like I've been given omnipotent, or I guess in this case, unlimited power to run different things in the entertainment industry. And today I'm going to talk about Lucasfilm and what I would do if I were handed the reins and said, drive the ship for a while. And I'll just head this off at the pass right now. If you're here because you think that my number one item on this list is going to be fire Kathleen Kennedy, this is not going to be that kind of video. I'm not here to repeat a lot of what has been said in a bunch of other videos around the internet. This is really more about how to build up Lucasfilm and build up all the various franchises, Star Wars, of course, being first among them, instead of working on ways to tear them down. We are going to talk about accountability in this plan to revise and refresh and redo things at Lucasfilm, but this isn't just about those same old talking points. I love Lucasfilm, and I love the things that they produce. I'm a big fan of Star Wars, I'm a big fan of Indiana Jones, and I want to see those things get better. So this is really a list of steps that I think will improve things and not just kind of obliterate what they already have. So without further ado, let's get to number one on my list, and that is low volume, high quality. Disney as a whole made a massive tactical error by dramatically ramping up production, first theatrically and then for Disney Plus, and I think the area where that has become most evident is with Star Wars. When you look at what's been done over the past several years and the number of development deals that they've signed, it becomes very obvious that nobody has really figured out how to just crank out Star Wars movies and Star Wars shows. And I think that that's how it should be. I don't think that Star Wars is a high volume franchise. I think it's epic storytelling, but it shouldn't be 5 or 6 or 8 different projects over the course of a year. If you look at Star Wars, for example, on the streaming side, if the only shows that Lucasfilm had produced since Disney Plus launched were The Mandalorian, Andor, and let's say either Obi-Wan Kenobi or Ahsoka, I think the discussion around Star Wars right now would be a lot different because those shows would have been given more room to breathe, and they all also would have been given more time to get developed and to get in shape. Not that they weren't good shows. I liked all of them to certain degrees, some more than others, but the more time you give a project to actually go through the process of writing and development, the better the end results usually are. I'd argue that making 3 great shows or 3 great movies is of greater value to the franchise than making 6 mediocre shows or even 3 great shows mixed with 3 mediocre shows. Consistency is important now in the entertainment industry, now more than ever. And I think that what we've seen with Star Wars is that increasing the output isn't actually great for the health of the franchise. All right, number 2 on my list is probably going to upset some people, and I'm going to focus a little bit on Star Wars for a few points here because it is the premier franchise for Lucasfilm, and I understand that people might have a visceral reaction to this, but my second suggestion is to recast the original Star Wars characters. And I know nobody really wants to think about replacing Luke, Han, and Leia, but if you realistically want to continue the legacies of these characters on screen, I think it's what you have to do. Putting aside the whole moral issues that could be involved here, I just don't think that de-aging and AI and CGI are where they need to be in order to keep having the faces of Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher play these characters. Now, the first thing that people will do when I mention recasting the characters is point to Solo and say, well, look, they tried it with Alden Ehrenreich and it didn't work. But I would argue that Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo was not the biggest problem, far from the biggest problem that movie faced. I actually think that he pulled off the part pretty well. It's time to find actors who can take on these legacies for the next phase of storytelling, and it's been done before for characters from James Bond to Batman. Nobody is here trying to erase the memory or erase the legacies of Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and Carrie Fisher. That will remain in place forever, and it's not like they're being replaced or shoved out of the way. But if we're going to tell new stories, we need to find new actors. And what are these new stories? Well, I'm glad you asked, because my number 3 suggestion is to start making Star Wars Legends movies and TV shows. I am not on the decanonize the sequel trilogy train because as frustrating as they are, and those movies really do frustrate me due to their lack of planning, I think some good came out of them. And you have characters like Rey and others that can be carried forward with storytelling. I don't want to wipe them out completely. But the sequel trilogy also didn't do a whole lot of favors for the legacy characters, and mainly the main trio that we were just talking about. And I would love to open up new avenues to continue telling stories with those characters without having to completely wipe the continuity. And the easy answer there is to start making movies out of what were once the novels and video games, etc., that were then decanonized when Disney bought Star Wars and labeled Star Wars Legends. I want to start making those projects, and I'll tell you right now that the first project would be Heir to the Empire and Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy. Now, some people might say that this would be too confusing, but Marvel has already educated the mass audience about what multiple timelines can be. They know what a multiverse is, and you have the label for these movies right there. You call it Star Wars Legends, Heir to the Empire. It actually works, I think, when you think about it, and it takes these characters out of these sort of canon loop that they're stuck in right now, where you can only put them in certain situations in certain years because the sequel trilogy has put them in other places. It frees up more opportunities for you to tell the stories. And if they're great stories, and for people that have read the books and played the games, a lot of these are great stories. I really don't think that the audience is going to get too stressed about where it fits into this overall Star Wars canon. This also applies to video game series like Knights of the Old Republic and The Force Unleashed, as well as newer ones like Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. These franchises also have a lot of goodwill, but aren't quite as known to the non-gaming audience as the stories of Han, Luke, and Leia. So you really can have your cake and eat it too here. You can continue with your main Star Wars characters that you've established in the sequel trilogy. You can go back and tell new stories with the original characters from the George Lucas years, and you can also expand the universe by doing the video games and other novelizations to really make this universe thrive again. All right, moving from what you see on screen to stuff that happens off screen, my number 4 thing, if I ran Lucasfilm, would be to ignore the haters. And I want to be very clear here, when I say haters, I'm not talking about anyone who has negative feedback about what Lucasfilm is doing. I actually think it's healthy for a company to keep an ear to the ground to see what the fan reaction is to the things that they're making, whether they agree with those reactions or not. But there is a loud and growing chorus of voices that to me seems to exist solely to tear down Star Wars, everything it makes, and everybody involved with it. And I think that these voices get a disproportionate amount of attention, not just from fans in the media, but from Lucasfilm itself. There's listening to feedback from your fan base, and then there's allowing the negative things that are being said out there to dictate what you say on a corporate level. And I feel like a lot of times the messaging around Star Wars movies and TV shows is almost solely driven by the negative and often horrible things that are said online about the projects and about the actors in them and about the people who create them. Hating Star Wars is basically a cottage industry at this point. It generates millions of views and millions of dollars for people on YouTube and elsewhere. And that's not going to change. No amount of you trying to combat that is going to stop that. And as a matter of fact, the more you acknowledge it, I think the more it encourages people to do it. There are some projects where I feel like I heard more about the horrible things that were being said online with the talent involved than I heard about the actual projects themselves. And I get it to a certain extent. Listen, if you're walking down the street and you get punched in the mouth, that's what you're going to want to talk about for the rest of the day. But trying to shame people that are saying these things and asking them to stop saying these things isn't going to make them stop saying these things. In my experience, the thing that really quiets down people that hate a project before it even comes out is to make that movie or make that show really good. Because then it kind of makes them look foolish and they have to either drop the subject or backtrack and move the goalposts. Listen, nobody's ever going to stop talking negatively online. That's just not going to happen. But at a company level, at Lucasfilm, you have a choice about whether to platform those things, even if it's to battle against them. And again, a lot of times these are horrific things that are being said. If there's actionable stuff that's being said, then it should be dealt with, but not in the media. Success is the best revenge here. And I think the messaging from Lucasfilm should be based on what the movies are, what fans should be excited about, publicize the projects, get people excited about them. You're never going to win over your critics. You're only going to try to win over people who are coming in wanting to actually enjoy a good Star Wars movie or show. Somewhat related to that point is my next action item, which is don't force it. And yes, that pun was intended. Star Wars has really widened the net in the last 10 years or so as far as who the leads of their films are. And we're seeing a lot more women, a lot more people that are part of marginalized groups that are taking lead roles. And that's great. My issue here is that instead of taking these actions, which I think are commendable, Lucasfilm also seems to feel the need to take what I call a victory lap. And this is not just Lucasfilm, by the way. This is Disney in general. They do things that I think are great, but then they go a little over the top as far as patting themselves on the back about it and really make themselves even more of a target. It's great that Rey inspired a new generation of young girls to dress up and feel a part of the fandom, and there's nothing wrong with highlighting that as part of the story surrounding the character's impact. But I think the declaration that the Force is female, for example, was way over the top, because that point is made by the fact that Rey exists and she was the lead in your new sequel trilogy. I don't really understand the need to make a statement on top of that statement. That's not to say that the Force shouldn't be female by including main characters who are women. Leia and Padme were both crucial characters in their own trilogies. Rey and Jyn Erso are both great characters who carried their films more than capably. They didn't require a declaration. They just existed as good characters. And honestly, if you're Lucasfilm and you make a point to go so far over the top to remind the audience that you've cast women in the lead of your movies, then I think that it makes the conversation a lot less about the characters and a lot more about you, the producers behind the movies. Let the focus stay on the characters. All right, moving on to a wider scope, my next suggestion is to diversify, and not the kind that often sets off the alarm bells from people that we were talking about earlier. If you look at the upcoming Lucasfilm release schedule, every single movie on there is Star Wars. And I think that they're running the risk of becoming a one-trick pony, especially with Indiana Jones, I hope, finally ending its run as a franchise series. In the 80s, Lucasfilm produced Star Wars and Indiana Jones, but they were also involved with movies like Labyrinth, Willow, The Land Before Time, and yes, Howard the Duck, among others. Sure, not all of those projects worked, but Lucasfilm was making huge movies while also doing projects with filmmakers like Francis Ford Coppola and Jim Henson and Paul Schrader. Under Disney, the focus of Lucasfilm has become very narrow. It is time to broaden that scope. Lucasfilm was built on imagination and creative ambition. Both of those things are risky, but we've seen that they can both pay off as well. And as a company, I think it's time for Lucasfilm to stop asking questions like, okay, well, what's the next Indiana Jones film going to be? And start asking questions like, okay, what's the next film we can make that can become the next Indiana Jones? And when starting a new project, whether it's a new creation or part of a franchise, my next suggestion is to ask yourself the question, why? The best projects, especially ones that are part of a franchise, are the ones that add something meaningful to the story that you already know or have something new to say. I came out of Andor with a new understanding of the Empire, a new perspective on Cassian Andor the character, and a feeling that I knew the world of Star Wars during the Empire's reign better. It answered the why question very easily. Compare that to a show like the Book of Boba Fett. What were you really able to take away from that other than story setup for The Mandalorian that could have been done in the next season? There was some further development of the character, but to me it was outweighed by everything else, and the show really felt like mandated filler, a command to make a show featuring a popular character that never really had a clear sense of its goal or purpose. This could also be broadened to the Willow series on Disney+, as well as Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I didn't hate either of them, but their respective universes could have existed without those projects being made. Each project that gets the green light has to have an essential reason to exist, either furthering something that we know or adding something new and meaningful to what we know. And if you can't answer the question, why should we make this show? Then you shouldn't make it. And when we talk about popular franchises, this next point is something that should be on the table. Retirement is an option. Indiana Jones could have and should have existed as the original movie trilogy and maybe the Young Indiana Jones series. Everything you needed to know about the character exists in those projects. And yet, They kept going back to the creative well with, I think, mixed at best results, because companies generally don't like to leave what they see as cash on the table if they have an actor that's still around and they think that they can make a little bit of extra cash by making another movie. The option to retire a character has to be on the table. The only reason that I suggested recasting Han, Luke, and Leia is because I think that there are still exciting storytelling options left for those characters if you broaden the horizons and do those Star Wars Legends movies. If I didn't see an avenue for them, then I would advocate retiring those characters as well. I think that Indiana Jones as a character, as much as I love those original movies, should be retired. If Lucasfilm is taking the Diversify mandate I talked about earlier seriously, then they need to put some serious creative energy into finding new characters for us to love and not milking the ones that we already do. Next up, if you're going to get creative, then you have to assemble a council, maybe not a Jedi council, but a council nonetheless. George Lucas created Lucasfilm, of course, but his collaboration with Steven Spielberg was also key to its success. Even on projects that Spielberg wasn't involved in, Lucas sought his counsel and advice. The Lucasfilm of today needs that sort of brain trust. Kathleen Kennedy, as the head of the company, can handle all of the corporate and business stuff. She is one of the most successful producers of all time. But you need a team of collaborators who are available to pitch in creatively when needed. They seem to have begun this process with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, which isn't a bad start. You really have to find creators who like each other, who trust each other, who are willing to give advice on each other's projects, and who want to guide other creators to success. When you look at where George Lucas came from, the golden era of cinema in the 1970s, it was really a group of filmmakers who all respected and consulted with each other in order to make everyone's movies better. That sort of mentality needs to come back to Lucasfilm. Next up is the point that I think is one of Lucasfilm's biggest problems in the last decade or so, which is to let development happen naturally. One key factor in the perception that Lucasfilm is in trouble or is in disarray is that they keep announcing development deals with filmmakers that don't go anywhere. In 2017, Lucasfilm announced that Rian Johnson was going to do a new trilogy before The Last Jedi even opened. In 2018, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss were announced to be doing a trilogy of their own while Game of Thrones was still in production. And in 2020, Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron movie was announced, complete with a release date and a teaser video. All of these projects were announced by Lucasfilm, not through industry reports, before any development had really happened, and nobody really knew what the stories were going to be. And all of these projects don't look likely. The closest thing that might happen is Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron movie, but her last update, which happened earlier this year, was basically, yeah, I'm still interested, and we're going to try to get to a story that maybe everybody can agree on. Not exactly a clear blueprint for going forward. The tail's wagging the dog here. Now, there's nothing wrong with working with all those people, but you have to do the work first. Develop the projects first. Figure out what the idea is going to be. Make sure that the filmmaker doesn't lose interest or not be able to crack the idea or get too busy. And once that work has been done, then you announce what you're going to do with them when you're ready to actually start the work on the project. Lack of planning is what ultimately sunk the sequel trilogy, and I think it's important not to make the same mistake twice. My final suggestion for Lucasfilm goes back to what I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, and that is accountability. If this plan is implemented and nothing changes, things are still a mess, or if current leadership, namely Kathleen Kennedy, resists implementing a new plan and making the necessary changes, that's when you start talking about a replacement. Disney has been a hot mess these last few years, as has the rest of the entertainment industry. Everybody right now is trying to claw their way out of the Sarlacc pit of overinvestment in streaming. And people like Kevin Feige have made the exact same mistakes that Kathleen Kennedy has made, or has been forced to make the same mistakes that Kathleen Kennedy has made, and he hasn't been fired. He's now trying to get Marvel back on the right path, and I think that Kathleen Kennedy should be given the same opportunity. Let her execute a new plan for success and then decide what her future is going to be. Accountability is important, and a lot of people have said that Kathleen Kennedy has not faced accountability for what's happened with the Star Wars franchise and with everything at Lucasfilm, but I think that she's also presided over some successes as well as some failures. I also think that while rare in Hollywood, patience and loyalty are both important virtues to have, but there is a clock. And the clock does at some point run out. So I'm not saying that Kathleen Kennedy should stay the head of Lucasfilm forever, but I'm saying give her the shot, give her a new plan, see what those results are, and once those results are in, it's time to decide whether she stays or whether she goes. So that's what I would do if I were the emperor of Lucasfilm. What do you think? What suggestions would you make? Are there any changes that I said I'd make that you completely disagree with? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching the show. And before we go, I'm going to thank the sponsor for this video, Miracle Made. I've been on the road this week, and one thing I've really been missing are my Miracle Made sheets. These hotel sheets are nice, but they don't compare to the softness or comfort I have with the sheets on my bed at home. Miracle Made sheets were inspired by NASA and are made with silver-infused fabrics that are temperature regulating so you can stay cool during these hot summer nights. They also resist up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, which means they stay fresh longer, have to be washed less often, and smell better. And I'm glad you don't have to wash these sheets as much because I put my Miracle Made sheets right back on the bed as soon as they come out of the dryer, and you can bet that they will be on there all summer, so I can sleep great without having to wake up sweating in the middle of the night. Go to trymiracle.com/Dan to try Miracle Made sheets today, and whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code Dan at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle's so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Dan and use the code Dan to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Dan to treat yourself. Thanks to Miracle Made for sponsoring the show, and thank you for watching. You can find out more about them in the description below, and you can also find out about how to buy tickets for a live event I'm doing with my friend Christian Harloff in New York City in less than a week on Friday, June 21st. We're going to be talking movies, answering fan questions live. We'd love to see you there. But most importantly, thank you for watching this episode here on the channel. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.